Hello to all of my AP students. Well, congratulations on getting through the first chapter of your book as we enter into chapter 2 called Varieties of Civilizations. And right out of the gates, we get China. Bear in mind, China has a 5,000-year history. That's a really long time. But here's some good news. When the exam comes in the spring, you're only going to be tested on 1200 AD to now. However, the book did want an overview of China beforehand. So I will be brief, or as brief as I can be. Okay, so the Chinese were one of the first civilizations in human history called the Four River Valley civilizations. It's had 5,000 years of rule, the vast majority of it being based on this dynastic cycle. And this dynastic cycle, with the mandate of heaven, to the Chinese, they feel whoever's running the show, the gods want them to. They have the mandate of heaven, and there's peace and infrastructure. Life is pretty good, but then bad stuff happens. Too many taxes, infrastructure goes away, leadership treats people badly, they lose the mandate of heaven, things get really, really ugly into a chaotic mess, and they fight, and a new leader emerges to bring peace, and the cycle continues. It's like a big, giant historical recycle logo. So this dynastic cycle is the glue that kept China together through the centuries, from 1700 BC to the early part of the 20th century. That's a long, long time. So the earliest dynasty, the Shang Dynasty, it was the first organized river society. It introduced Chinese writing. It started this local trade, this veneration of ancestors into the Bronze Age. And to the Shang, it's the first recorded dynasty. And again, it's kind of laid the groundworks like silk, and in terms of veneration of ancestors, these concepts that China has hung its hat upon for a really long time. And then we have the Zhou. Now, the Zhou dynasty lasted a really, really long time, and it produced philosophies like legalism, Taoism. We leave the Bronze Age into the Iron Age, and you'll learn about legalism and Taoism in more detail as we go through this. It's the longest lasting Chinese dynasty and the first classical era dynasty. Okay, so this is, again, laying the groundworks of what becomes China. Now, from the Zhou, we go to the Qin. Now, the Qin lasted 400 years, but here we see the Great Wall being built. We see standardized money and weights and centralized powers, and we see China continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Okay, and here's some more details that we went over in class. And again, it was this foundation of what became China. And I'm breezing through this because, quite honestly, you're not getting tested upon this. But again, know that China has a deep, deep history predicated on this dynastic cycle. Okay, one thing that's very cool, the terracotta warriors, where they unearthed this. Now, my old student teacher who lived in China for some time has visited this, and it's in essentially something the size of an airplane hangar, and each one of these individuals was individually carved to look like the guard. Okay, so from legalist rule, we see more, harder, harsher thing. But again, think of it this way. The more people you have, the more harsh rule that you need. And there's the terracotta army to give you that visual of what I just described. One of the wonders of the world, in my opinion. Okay, so here I'm going to slow down a little bit. Now, the Han Dynasty, this connected the east to Rome to the west along the Silk Road. And then we see real game changers like the invention of paper and these Silk Road connections that really got the hemisphere flowing. Okay, Afro-Eurasia, Africa, Europe, and Asia. Public schools. Okay, and the Han Dynasty was very successful, became very wealthy, introduced civil service and merit exams, meaning you can't just have a job based on who you know. You have to earn the job. Okay. And this Han-Roman connection, this is really what got the world flowing, okay? And all the connections in between. We're going to get into great detail about this, okay? And again, we're still not in the part we're being tested, okay? This is the Sui dynasty, okay? And you can see it's slowing down a little bit. And China, after 5,000 years, has had its ups and it's had its downs. And they did redistribute land. They constructed these great canals, but again, People were overworked and overtaxed. Real easy way to make people happy in history. Give them peace, give them some money in their pockets and some food in their belly. People are pretty cool. When you don't do that, you don't last very long, as you can see. Okay, there's the Grand Canal today, the lasting legacy of the Swede dynasty. Now, the Tang is when we start seeing China really growing, becoming a world player, big time. The Han for sure and the Tang for sure. And they invented gunpowder. Talk about a game changer. They conquered territory. They're influencing Japan. The Tang, in fact, in my regular world history class, I talk about the big three. Okay, of all the Chinese dynasties, in AP we have to know a little more than the regular class, but it's Han, Tang, and Ming. These are the big three. Okay. And let me get to the one. Okay, now the Tang Code established the legal foundation to the East. So we're becoming more modernized with government. Okay, so this is important. Printing, porcelain, gunpowder, clocks. Okay, people were mixing. They brought safety to the Silk Road. Okay, so my point is I'm not going to do justice to old China. Okay, it's just a monster. Okay, this is kind of cool. Empress Wu Zetian, it was a female emperor, which is pretty cool. Okay, we don't have too many of those, especially in the old days. However, some practices were a little different through Western eyes, like for the example of foot binding, which is they brought up in the book, where they would take your feet and you would break them so they would look quite small, and that was considered, you know, a practice in China that was good, but it's a form of patriarchy. Obviously, if you're a female and you have feet like this, it's going to limit you compared to other people, okay? So we have the Shang Dynasty, and we're finally getting into the point that might be on your test. So it becomes a merchant society, urban life increases, very rich, and we see this blending of these Chinese belief systems. Eventually, Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism blends together into this distinctly Chinese way of doing things. But when the Mongols came around, the Mongols took them out like everybody else, okay? Like everybody else, okay? And then the compass. In fact, we call them the four great inventions of China: the compass, paper, printing, and gunpowder are the four great inventions of China. Then you can see the Yuan dynasty, the Mongol takeover, and clearly the Mongols did their thing. I'm going to teach you all about them. And during the Yuan dynasty, China was ruled by Mongols, okay, led by Kublai Khan, and it was not the happiest time for China. 40 million of them were killed. Confucians were persecuted. It was not a happy time. But again, in 5,000 years, China has seen it all. It's seen it all. And you can see the Mongol invasions are absolutely massive, okay? Didn't last for very long, but they absolutely conquered the world, and we'll get into this, okay? So, again, we see this Mongol rule during this time, and for the Chinese, you know, they had some, you know, say, but not really. The power was in Mongol hands, okay? And from the Yuan dynasty, we get this connection between Marco Polo, who was a Venetian merchant that traveled through China. And when he returned back to Europe, it really inspired people to start mixing with China again, okay? And you can see Marco Polo was very well traveled. Him and Ibn Battuta were the two men in those times who really did travel the world, okay? Now, I know that was like giving you a drink with a fire hose, not a garden hose. I just want you to realize this is just the opening chapter. For 5,000 years of history, I'm not going to do it justice here. We're going to get into more detail as we go, but hopefully you got the big points from class about the dynastic cycle, predicated by the mandate of heaven, that China has had its ups, it's had its downs, it's been conquered, it's been dominant, it's been in just about every position it can be in, and it's a very deep history. And today was just the opening, By springtime, you're going to know a lot more, okay? So that was just the point of today's class, and I appreciate you hanging in with me. I know that was a lot, and again, hang in there with me. You'll learn about China in more detail, and it won't be so big and scary come springtime when you take your test. So thank you for watching.